In this episode of the Iron Empire, the revival of the AMC Javelin is in full swing. All right guys, now we are back down here at Jake's Chop Shop. This time, we're not on the Sandman, we're not on the XB, we're looking at the AMC Javelin. For those of you who don't know, I own not one, but two AMC Javelins. Don't know what that is? Google it. American motors basically come out to rival the big three, Chevy, Chrysler, and Ford. Now, in the late 60s, they started to put horsepower and muscle cars out in the market, which was something they planned on never doing. But thank goodness they did, because I believe that they put out some of the best muscle cars of the era, including the Javelin. So this is my 69 SST Javelin, and that there is a 68 Javelin. Essentially they're identical car. The SST, I couldn't actually tell you what exactly come different in it. It does have a different option motor. It does have some go fast stripes on it, some hood scoops, nothing super beefy about it. If you wanted to go real performance, you needed to buy yourself an AMX, which is basically a short wheelbase Javelin, only a two-seater. They were built for racing, drag racing in particular, and they were pretty successful because they had a pretty big displacement motor. This one is a 390, the factory base model one being a 290, and a light car, a super light car. Interesting fun fact about the AMC is that all the engines, we're talking about the second generation V8, the earlier ones are a different story. From the mid to late 60s, I believe, the second generation AMC V8 come out on the market, and they were all the same. They didn't have a small block, they didn't have a big block, they had one block fits all. So you had anywhere from a 290 all the way up to, in the later years, a 401. They had, I think, maybe half a dozen or more different displacements throughout the year. The one that I managed to score in this SST is a 390. Definitely not the factory motor for this car. This car has a bit of a history. Now this thing, judging by the Raiders sticker, this was from Oakland, California, and I assume that one came from the same allotment. This come from a fella over in the States called Ed Stack. He was of Ed Stack Enterprises. I didn't show this in the last video, which was probably 18 months ago or more, but this is really cool. This car not only has owner's manuals, it even has Ed Stack, the last known owner of this car in the States, his business card, and also it has some traffic infringements. We've got a parking fine. And this thing is from, where is it? There was even there you go, probably last registered in 1989. So this puppy has been off the road for a long, long time. And I dare say it had something to do with the front end. Now I've cut some of this out, but the reason I cut it out is because it had been in a bingle. The front end was pushed in. There wasn't even a guard on this side. It had pushed right up into the carrot panel. I don't think it done any damage in the roof, but it was close. There's a lot of pushing happening right here. And we done a video way back, if you do a bit of scrolling back on the channel, where we try to get a lot of this out, and we had this thing welded up and tied up to straps, and we had it up to this post, and we were pushing it and just heaving on it to try and get the front end of it out of this car. And I was just throwing a tape measure over it just now because I couldn't remember how close I'd got it, and I'm within probably 5 to 7 millimeters from square, because obviously every time you want to measure something, you want to check for squareness diagonally. Sideways, it's identical to this. Front to back, it's identical. But squareness, it's still out by about 5 to 7 millimeters. So it's going to take a little bit more work. And of course, The bonnet, which is buried, is going to take a lot of work to get that back to square because it has been smacked in pretty hard. And likely it'll probably be the only bonnet that ever fits on this car. If we try to put a factory one back on, it probably won't quite fit as well. But I'm going to do my best to save this front end because, and try and save as many panels as we can, because of course you can't just find someone wrecking one of these things. These are super rare. Although they were built in Australia, they were marketed in Australia as a Rambler. They were also known in America as Rambler, but more so just AMC. But they're still a super rare car. Even in America, they're still getting pretty rare over there. There is still a lot of aftermarket repo stuff coming out for them, fortunately, but it's definitely never going to be on the same level as Chevy, Ford, or Mopar. Now, more interesting fun facts about the AMC. It has nothing to do with Chrysler. Actually, it's a little bit of a lie. It has a little bit to do with Chrysler later in life. AMC come to an end in 1980 or something. I probably should do some fact checking, but AMC went bust. It was purchased in the end. At one stage, it was sold to Renault, and at one stage, I believe it was owned by Chrysler. But there is pretty much no crossover between any AMC engine stuff and Chrysler, although a lot of people think because of the displacement. You've got a 360, the same as a Mopar. You have a 390, the same as a Ford, but none of this is in conjunction. The only things that are the same with a AMC to a Chrysler that I know of, I believe in the early 70s they did change over to a torque flight transmission, although the bell housing was completely different. It was designed, the case and the bell housing of the torque flight is all one piece, and they were designed specifically to go behind an AMC engine. The diffs were a Borg-Warner, I think. Once again, it could be wrong, but obviously Borg-Warner were in pretty much every car that ever existed. So the AMC is completely its own animal, and with that comes a lot of finicky little tricks of the trade when it comes to building the engine, which is exactly what we're doing right now. So my engine happens to be a 390, is at Harman Engine Reconditioning, getting all the machine work done. Of course, with machine work comes a lot of fine tuning. There's parts that need to be ordered before you do machine work. You've got to measure everything to within hundredths of a thou of an inch. It's super particular. And of course, every time you want to do a different thing or you want to change something along the way or make a modification, comes a long list of repercussions. So I'm going down that path right now. We've ordered some pistons from the States. Now they come over, they're a Wiseco piston, they're forged. Unfortunately, the difference between forged and a cast piston is that the actual metal will expand at a different rate or to a different size between the two metals. So that even plays a part in what size you have to bore the bores out. So that all has to be taken into consideration. So at the moment, we've got a couple of sleeves coming over from WA that Chris from Harman's has ordered. One of the bores was completely smashed. There is a bit of footage which I'll try and scrounge up, or some photos showing the damage of the bores. This car, when it was crashed, before or after at some stage, maybe the engine blowing up caused the crash, or maybe the crash caused the engine to blow up, I don't know, but one of the pistons was basically disintegrated. And when that happened, the crankshaft come around, it nicked the bottom of the bore, it bent that and shattered the bore. Fortunately, to find that damage, it had to be put on a special tool, which basically you spray down with a solution with iron in it, and you put a magnet on it, and it shows up under X-ray light. I'm probably explaining this wrong, but basically there's a full method. We've done that. We're going back far out 2 or so years ago, where I've done all this to find the damage of the engine in order to order the parts to fix the engine. So bottom line is the engine is well on its way to being repaired. Next up will be the crankshaft. Obviously that will need to be reground with new bearings. The good thing about these 390s and also the 401s is they all had from factory forged steel cranks. So they are super durable, heavy duty, way better than just a normal basic model engine which has had a normal, a standard sort of crank in it. And also the push rods. One of my push rods did have a slight crack in it, but it took a hell of a whack, and to the naked eye you could not see any damage on this. The push rods are also forged as well. So the rotating assembly in these things are extremely tough. So to build everything back up with today's technology and clearances, this should be a really stout motor. Now we're going to rewind the clock literally 2.5 years ago, where this engine build all begun. So last day down here at Harman's to check out the engine this week, and today's plan is just to do a quick mock-up of the piston. I'm going to drop the crank back in with the old bearings, sit everything loosely in place and rotate the block now that it's all clean and the pistons have all been freed up, and I want to check out the deck height of this engine so I can find out what my compression ratio is and to work out how far we have to cut this thing down to get any sort of compression at all. So that's all we're going to get stuck into this motor today for this week. So yeah, I'm going to start by just linishing up the surfaces just with some steel wool just so it's nice and clean. Obviously the block's nice and clean now, but there's surface rust on it and stuff. I'm sitting around. So yeah, let's see how this all pans out. Hopefully the pistons aren't too far down there. Now, as I mentioned, which may have been hard to hear because of the machines going in the background, today's plan was just to clean up the block. It had already been in the acid bath and in the parts washer as well, so this thing was clean as a whistle, but just want to run over it with some CRC, a little bit of steel wool, and then carefully put the old bearings back in the block, replace the crankshaft, and then assemble one of the pistons and rods as a mock-up so we can then do a measurement to find out exactly what my compression ratio is.
It's 5.5 down below deck height.
5.5 now. So by the time this block is decked, it should be bang on 0 deck height.
Yeah, I want to be a movie star.
I'm checking out that finger action.
Whoa. Plenty of practice.
So here we got Chris showing us how to CC a pair of cylinder heads. It's basically some wild wizardry which involves sealing up the valves in their valve seats, then putting a bit of Perspex over the top of the combustion chamber, and then filling it up with a solution to measure exactly how much has to fill it up. And that's how you get your CCs. These heads come out at 58 cc, which worked out great because as I had done a bit more research later on, the 58 cc heads with the dogleg port turned out to be a really good set of heads. Okay, so I've been at Harman Engine Reconditioning for a couple of hours, just doing a bunch of measuring, checking all my parts, seeing what's there, what I need to do to get prepped for the machine work and move forward with the build. Now I'm out in the back, down in the back blocks where they do all their blasting and cleaning up. I've got a bunch of valves here which came out of the engine. There was one valve that was just absolutely smashed, broken off. The exhaust valve was just buried into the head, and that's fully fucked, obviously. So we have to do a new valve seat there, and I have to source a single valve. I'm pretty sure I'm down to only one valve that I need. The rest are all existing and good. Now I'm really lucky that I have the biggest available factory valves, which are actually pretty big. Like this in comparison to a small block Mopar are absolutely huge. I mean, the exhaust valve, which are always smaller, is almost like the same size as the inlet valve on a small block Mopar. So these inlet valves are 2.025 inches. The exhaust are 1.65, I think, or 1.68, I think. And they are the biggest factory available valve in the best flowing dogleg head. So I got really lucky there. But these are full-on factory. They have a lot of ugly shapes and everything, which is great for longevity, but not so much for performance. So I'm going to start by throwing these in the bee blaster, give them a good clean up, and then once we've done that, we'll throw it in the valve grinding machine and see if they come up nice and square. If these things are straight, we can move along with the build. Now that my valves are all bee blasted, looking crisp as, I've obviously got one missing, so we'll have to order at least one. So now it's time to throw them up in the machine and see if these are straight. Hopefully the rest are all good. I don't have to order one of these things.
I'm not explaining nothing.
Try not to swear too much. This is you just telling me.
Didn't we clean the machine first?
No.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll just call it chuck. Wheel. Pinch up on the valve.
Alright, so the exhausts are 45, so it's the smaller valves here. They're already cut at 45, which is more common. The inlets are at 30, which is what this machine is set up at, but we're going to cut them all at 45, which will get a bit more flow. I'm going to back face them and get rid of that little ridge, which is basically a little speed hump. All right, so what we've got is the valve grinding machine. We've got two of them set up here at Harman's, so that they can speed up the process. Basically, one of them will cut the 45, which is the face of the valve, where it actually seats on the seat in the head, and then the other one here is set up basically for whatever you want to go. This one's set up at 30, so they can basically back face them, which is take off that little speed hump there. Any extra flow you can add is going to make the air do what it's got to do a lot better, and that's what we're here for, try and get this all to work, seal up, and see if we can save these factory valves. I'm just going to keep zooming in on you because you don't want to be on film. Come up pretty good considering how pitted it was.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah, it's not bad.
So now that the face has been, the seat face, is that right? The seat face has been refaced on the 45 here. Now got up in the 30-degree machine, that's already set to 30, and back facing the valve, which basically takes off this little tiny ridge here you see. A bit hard to see, there's a little speed hump. It will take that off and basically just create a more smooth transition. And here's the results. Oh, here we go. Sweet.
Will you be there again to pick me up before
So I finished up grinding up all these valves. The exhaust side is done now. I've ended up with the face of a 45 is now all ground, and also a 30 on the back side, just to help with a bit of flow. Of course, with an exhaust valve, the airflow goes this way, like as in it hits the valve at the face and then rolls around. So I might chamfer that front edge slightly. We'll probably do that on the lathe to make it a little bit easier. I'll go along and do those a little bit later when I come back to do the intake valves, because the inlet valves, I've spent a little bit of time just playing around with some, just sort of just experimenting basically of trying to get a little bit more flow in these valves and just working with them. Now I'm going to move to another spot in the workshop where it's a bit brighter, and I'll show you what I've done to try and overcome some of the ridges that are put into the factory valves. Now, if you can hear me all right. Now you'll see here with these two valves, the factory one, which has like a really quite prominent ridge, which disperses the air and the fuel, and it sort of is going to send the air into, it's going to sort of make it turbulent, it's going to spin it around, it's going to do all sorts that we don't want for flow. We want for performance, we want the air to just sort of go around that valve nice and smooth. You'll see what I've done here, and I think it's come up pretty good. I've ended up, basically what I've ended up with is essentially a three different angle grinds, but after I done the last grind, which is the one that you won't see anymore, I actually put it back in the blaster and just blasted just to make it look pretty again, and then I recut the valves just lightly just to make them look fresh, and I'm really happy with the result. So at a glance you would sort of think it's just a factory thing. There's a little bit of slight pitting on these things. I mean, they are original valves, so we're talking like 1970, the head's I think 1970, so they're 50 plus years old. There's a bit of pitting, but they're still in good shape. There's no ridges where the valve stem seals run, and yeah, overall really stoked with that. I'm going to come back another day and finish off these exhaust ports, and while we're at it, we'll probably maybe sit the heads in, maybe seat one of the valve seats and see how they all seal up before I go ape shit, and then I'll go ahead and start doing a bit more porting before all the valve seats are completely finalized. So you leave that to last. Okay, so that is all we're going to have time for in this episode. Thanks for coming back to the channel. I also want to say a massive thank you to Bill Honors, who sent me over this magazine a couple of years ago when we first seen the Javelins on the channel. Bill lives over in Fort Wayne over in the States, and he actually has an XB Falcon over there in America, which is absolutely so cool. And yeah, he thought of me enough to send me this book over, which is unreal because this is still used today. I've spoke to a few AMC gurus, and they still refer to this performance book, actually brought out by American Motors back in 1972. And this book has got so much info in it regarding all the go fast mods of basically how to make an AMC perform. Literally step by step, how to make a drag car, brought out by AMC. It's just unreal. Like, we're talking about tubular chassis modifications, suspension, cylinder head porting, valve grinds like we did today. There's just so much cool information in this, and I've been reading this like the Bible to try and learn about how we're going to build this motor, and it's been super helpful. So thanks to Bill for that. Thank you to everyone who jumped on last week, picked up a new t-shirt. We got these long sleeves in stock. We're probably going to be struggling to get them to you before Christmas if you were to order as of right now, but on Monday morning I will send some out express if anyone wants to jump on and grab one. Anyway, so that's going to be it for this time around. Don't forget to like the video. Let me know what you thought of the build in the comments below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Also, a massive thank you to Chris down there at Harmon's for letting me come into his world and do my build there. Is super generous, and he's always been super welcoming to me. So massive thanks to Chris. Couldn't do it without you, mate. And that's it for this time around, guys. See you on an upcoming episode. Cheers.
Don't wanna be here alone.